Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's The Truth Is Not Out There podcast. My name is Katelyn Scott, and I'm currently an English language teacher and doctoral student focusing my research on utilizing mentoring programs to increase employee retention and well-being and maximizing organizational performance.
Hi everyone, my name is Sang Lee, as you sang a song, and I'm currently working as a graduate assistant at George Mason's University Life Division. I am interested in education abroad experiences for college faculty and their acculturation processes. Today we'll be examining and discussing Edward Said's text titled Representations of the Intellectual. The book explores what it means and what it takes to be a true intellectual in modern society. Do you consider yourself an intellectual? And what does that even mean? Please stick around in this episode and share your thoughts with us. We love hearing from our listeners.
Individuals often have their own meanings for what constitutes being an intellectual. However, for this podcast episode, we will be utilizing Said's definition of an intellectual as someone who is seen as an exile, an amateur, whose role is to speak the truth to power, even at the risk of ostracism or imprisonment. A recent example that occurred in the realm of diversity and inclusion within the workplace is from E&E News, which brought to light allegations of racism and sexism in the workplace. Numerous female African American employees from the Office of Children's Health Protection made allegations of discrimination against director and world-renowned pediatrician Dr. Ruth Etzel. According to the employees, they were not treated fairly and were not given equal opportunities for professional development via work assignments. In addition, they feared they would be ostracized and retaliated against from particular people occupying higher power positions. Given that I'm focusing my research on the retention and well-being of employees, I wonder just how many employees feel excluded and uncomfortable in their work environment each day. What impact does that have on team collaboration and the overall performance of the organization?
To piggyback off of what Katelyn just shared on speaking the truth to power, I would like to bring our attention to the rising number of reported anti-Asian hate crimes. So there are 23 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the US, and since the pandemic began, a New York Times poll suggests that 1 out of every 3 fear that they will be attacked. The FBI just published a report on October 25th stating that hate crimes against Asians rose 76% in 2020. This is the highest jump in 12 years, according to CNN. An American actor and producer, Daniel Day Kim, testified before the U.S. Congress about anti-Asian hate crimes in America 2 days after the shooting and killing of 7 Asian people in Atlanta in March of 2021. He is dismayed about the seriousness of brutal crimes taking place targeting specific communities due to the distorted view of the Asian Americans. He also talked about how polling results broken down by race often do not include numbers of Asian Americans. A pollster looked at him dead in the eye and said that it is because Asian Americans are statistically insignificant. He shares his frustration with the lawmakers that statistically insignificant literally means Asian Americans don't matter. He mentions that a good starting point for a fundamental change could be the education system. Too often, the history of immigrants in classrooms is portrayed in a way that it perpetually makes them feel like foreigners in their own country. He concludes by saying it is not Asian American history, but American history. How eloquent yet convincing he was making his arguments to the people in power also made me ask, as a student affairs professional with an Asian background, how do I speak boldly about the advocacy and well-being of students from Asia or of Asian descent to the leadership at Mason? So Katelyn, we just shared about intellectuals speaking boldly to power, but our listeners might be wondering, how do we define power? It is a complicated concept to pinpoint, to say the least. So I would like to make a suggestion to you, my friend. How about I cover the vertical levels of power, so the depth of the concept, and you cover the horizontal breadth of what power could mean?
That sounds like a great plan, Sang, because it's important to know both types of power as well as real-world examples of them in action.
Perfect. So I believe power can be scaled based on a context. It can be defined as a person, a group, or organizations with possession of control, authority, or influence over others. As a child growing up, your parents or caregivers can be people of power to you. It could be professors in a learning environment and your employers or supervisors in a professional setting. On a much larger scale, I think the local and federal governments of your country can be defined as power too.
I agree, Sang. And with power, I often wonder, why do people follow others in positions of power? What influence do they have over other individuals? And what exactly are they trying to change? So, as we know, power comes in vertical forms and horizontal forms. And there are 5 types of horizontal power. The first type is coercive power. This is the ability to punish if expectations are not met. So, examples of this form of power within the workplace include the ability for people in higher power positions to fire, demote, or transfer employees to undesirable positions. The second type of power is reward power, which is the ability to reward. The most effective manner in which leaders can use rewards are to recognize the accomplishments within the context of the referent power. So, an example of this form of power would be that a parent has reward power over their children. The next type of power is legitimate power, which involves authority being granted to someone stemming from a position in a group or organization. So, for example, managers typically have more authority than staff, as they have the authority to make decisions that will ultimately impact more people. And a person who holds legitimate power is the CEO of an organization. Then there's expert power, which is the extent of specialized skills or knowledge followers attribute to a leader. Expert power derives from group members' assumptions that the leader possesses superior skills, knowledge, and abilities. An example of this form of power would be a physician who specializes in a specific area of expertise. And then lastly, there is referent power, which is the desire for a feeling of oneness and acceptance in a valued relationship. Referent power is based upon identification with, attraction to, or respect for the leader. And an example of this form of power would be a celebrity or someone with a large following. Now that we have a better understanding of the various types of power, let's talk about types of thinkers. What does it mean to be a critical thinker, and how do we build thinkers? To be a critical thinker, one must promote an atmosphere of curiosity. This involves intellectuals asking questions and challenging the status quo. Thinkers never stop learning, and they never stop asking questions. Thinkers are also aware. They know issues and challenges that are present, and they're cognizant that change needs to occur. They also have total honesty, meaning they're truthful with themselves regarding any gaps in their knowledge, and they seek to find answers to information they don't know. In addition, they have a growth mindset, meaning they're determined and dedicated, and through hard work and resiliency, they aspire to reach their goals.
Now, those are some really great insights, Katelyn. And I believe there's no one-size-fits-all model to build thinkers. However, here are some attributes I thought of when defining a true thinker. I use the acronym, please call me a nerd, INTEL. So I stands for insightful and sensible when sharing knowledge. N stands for nifty and nimble with their demeanor. T stands for tranquil and unflappable during the turmoil. E stands for encompassing of other cultures and beliefs. And lastly, L stands for level-headed and prudent when dealing with power.
That's a nerdy but great acronym, Sang, and will definitely help people remember the attributes for defining a true thinker.
Well, thank you, my friend. So, back to you, listeners. Now that we know how to build thinkers that can boldly speak the truth to power, how do we then tell the truth? So, for me, it really boils down to this. Intellectuals must periodically question firmly held assumptions about the historical narrative to introduce new knowledge and refresh understanding, because unchallenged mainstream consciousness distorts what we learn about history.
That's a great point, Sang. And as Said states, speaking the truth to power is carefully weighing the alternatives, picking the right one, and then intelligently representing it where it can do the most good and cause the right change. Intellectuals are able to view all options, choose a decision that is deemed most appropriate for the situation, and then apply that decision in areas that can enact the most effective change. Society is filled with very diverse individuals, all comprised of their own thoughts, beliefs, and backgrounds. Through the diversity that's present, we all have the power to learn from one another and acquire new knowledge and information. As intellectuals, it is our duty to be aware when challenges arise, be educated holistically on these diverse challenges, educate ourselves on differing viewpoints, and know that we have the power to enact incredible change.
I agree, Katelyn, and especially the point where you have to stay humble, yet you know that you have the power to enact an incredible change. I think that's my favorite quote that you made. And especially this is so true for such a diverse and transient area like the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So I actually have a quote. So I would like to leave our listeners with this quote from Catherine E. Weedle, Strategy Officer for Federal Policy and Equity at Lumina Foundation. The great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie that is deliberate, contrived, and dishonest. Rather, it is the persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic myth. So just thinking and reading her message, my conviction is to never be content with the status quo, as that is probably the tendency for many of us, and wisely question firmly held assumptions about the historical narrative. In this process, we require some INTEL from the true intellectuals. That's a wrap for us, folks. Thank you so much for listening to today's The Truth Is Not Out There podcast. I am Sang Lee.
And I'm Katelyn Scott. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting podcast episodes coming your way soon.